Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for December 2018. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator. And in this month's Total Quilter Monthly, we're going to be talking about how to create some quilt labels, and along the way we'll discover some of the neat text features that you have in Total Quilter and my decorative quilter. So if you want to follow along with this month's lesson, go ahead and open up Total Quilter or my decorative quilter. You can see that I have it set up with the grid off. It doesn't really matter for this lesson. You can have it with the grid on if you want. But let's get our screen set up the same way, just if you want to follow along. So come up to the top ruler up here and right click on it, and you'll see that I'm in inches mode. And if you are in metric, switch to inches. I have nothing else checked, so if you have any of these other things checked, just simply uncheck them. And to get out of this, you can simply click off it, and now we're all set. I've got a thread palette down here that is the Floriani cotton thread palette, so you can change to that by coming here to this icon for select thread chart, and you can see here I've got the Floriani cotton thread chart selected. Doesn't really matter what thread chart you have selected, but the Floriani cotton thread chart has fewer colors than other ones, so it's easy to pick the colors we need, although in this lesson the colors are not all that important to the way you do things. Obviously you'd want to put the colors that you want in the design and then in the machine when you stitch it out, but for right now we're just going to keep it on this palette. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one. You can see I've only got about 15 colors or so to choose from here, which makes it a little bit easier to find and select colors. So we're going to be working with text and some other objects to create our quilt label. But the first thing that we want to do is we want to set up some boundaries for our quilt label so that when we create it, we have a frame of reference for putting our text and other things that we want to put in the quilt label so that it comes out the final size that we want it. So for this exercise, I'm going to choose a quilt label that is 6 inches by 5 inches. And that's without any seam allowances if you want to turn it under, so you can add those if you want. The way I'm going to create those boundaries is I'm going to come up here to this tool, which is my pre-built shapes tool, and I'm going to choose the rectangle by clicking the little drop down and selecting the rectangle. Then I'm just going to click and drag an arbitrary size rectangle on here. Really doesn't matter what color it is, because I'm going to resize it now to exactly the size that I need by coming over here to my properties box and clicking my transform tab. Now before I do this, I'm going to uncheck maintain aspect ratio. You can see I already have it unchecked. And again, I want my width to be 6 inches, so I'm going to come here and change this to 6. I'm typing that on my keyboard. And I want my height to be 5, so I'm going to change that to 5, and I'm going to click apply. And that gives me my boundary for where I'm going to put things inside this label so it doesn't go outside the size I want. Now this is artwork, meaning that it won't stitch. It's just a reference line for us to see what we are doing. Now it doesn't really matter where this box is on the screen, but if I did want to center it on the screen, I could come up to this control right here, which is my alignment tool, click it, and this next to last icon right here is center to rulers. So we can go ahead and click that, so it's now centered on 0, 0, but that really does not matter. The only other thing I want to do is I want to zoom in so that this box fills the screen, so as I work you can get a better view of what I'm doing. So the way I'm going to do that is with my shortcut for zoom to fit, which is a double click of the magnifying glass. So now I've zoomed into my text box here, and I know that this is 6 inches across and 5 inches high. So as I put things in, once again, I will not go outside this boundary. And this is a pretty cool technique for anything you want to create that you want to limit to a certain space. I use this all the time. There are multiple other ways you could do this. You could use the grid lines. You could use guidelines, and we went over how to use guidelines in last month's lesson, so I'll refer you back to that. But I like this method because it's just quick and easy. And if I do want to convert this to an outline like a running stitch to show me where to trim the label, or if I just want to put a steel stitch or some other kind of decorative stitch around, like a motif stitch around the edge, I can just go ahead and use this line and turn it into stitches. But again, for today, we're just going to use it as a boundary marker. So we're going to jump right in and start adding some text to this label. The way you add text into the program is with the text tool, and it's located right here behind this T. And you'll notice if I click on the little black arrow that's next to it, I'll get a little drop down. And I've got another T and a circle with text around the circle. So you use this latter one for putting text on a circle, and we'll cover that in a future video. But for right now, we're just going to use the normal text, which is this T. So you go ahead and click on that again to get into text mode. And when you do that, if you look at my cursor, you'll see it's an arrow, but it also has an A with it, and there's also a little asterisk by the A. So the A is telling us that we're in text mode, and that is different than normal select mode. So most of what we do in the program, we use normal select mode, which is this icon here. But when we are in text mode, that's not lit up. This is lit up, and my cursor has that A by it. Now what the asterisk means is that if I click anywhere now, I'm going to put in a new line of text. And you'll see why that asterisk is important in just a second. So let's go ahead and just click anywhere in our box here. So I'm going to click, and it's going to put in the last text that I used, and it always puts in, the last font that I used. It's always going to put in a placeholder text which says my text. And the last font that I used was Andrew, but for my first line of text, I want to use something else. But we'll come to that in a second. But look at my cursor now. You can see I've got the A, but there's no asterisk. That's because I have this text selected. If I click off of it, you'll notice that I've got my asterisk back, meaning if I click again down here, I'll get another new line of text. So let me just show you that. If I click, I've got another line of text. Now I'm going to click my undo button so that I get rid of that. But what I want to show you is that when I'm in text mode, if I click somewhere out here in a blank area, my asterisk is showing, so that means I'm going to put in a new line of text. But watch what happens as I get close to the text that's there. You'll notice that as I get close, the asterisk disappears. That means if I click now, instead of putting in a new line of text, I'm actually going to select this text. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to select that text. And you'll notice that I've got all these little extra icons here, little blue diamonds and little orange squares. And those give me extra control over my text. You'll also notice that the ends of the box look different than the normal text, or selection box rather. So the normal selection box has these little black boxes at the corners, and it also has them in the middle of the lines. There's nothing in the middle of these lines, but there are round dots here and here. And there's these extra icons that look like a little house. This one looks like a little house right side up. This one looks like a little house pointing to the right. And there's also this little diamond here. So let's just play with these for a second. I'm going to switch to a different font. I'm going to switch to Anna, which is usually the font that comes up default. So I'm going to click Apply, and I just changed my text by clicking this drop down, selecting a new font, and then clicking Apply. You can see here I've got a preview of what that font is going to look like. And this preview window is important because you'll notice that as I hover over it, you can see all of the characters. Whoops, it went away. Let me go back and hover over it again. You can see all the characters that are in this. You can see my recommended heights. Whoops, it went away again. Okay, that's kind of annoying. So they built something in so that that doesn't happen. And that is, you can click on this little question mark icon right here. When you click that, now you have that same information, but in a form that won't go away until I click OK or click the little X. So you can see all the characters that are available in this font, and you can see the recommended minimum height and maximum height you should make this font when you are resizing it. So it shows it to you in inches and also in millimeters. So a lot of times it's important to take a look at these. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK to get rid of that window now because we don't need it. But you can see in this window I've got uppercase and lowercase fonts. So uppercase and lowercase. That tells me that this particular font has the ability to put upper and lowercase letters in. If I were to select a different font, and you'll notice as I hover over the fonts, they change. Okay, so I get a preview before I select anything. So if you look here at Effie, for example, I've got upper lowercase. Donuts has upper lowercase. Dolly does, Deanna does, Compact Block does. I can keep going. Oh wait, here's one called Circus. And you'll notice that instead of being ABC, ABC, it's ABCDEF. That means that I do not have lowercase characters in this particular font. So that's how I would select a font. So I'm just going to click off it because I want to stay on Anna. And I'm just going to show you what some of these extra controls do before we move on and actually create our quilt labels. So to do that, I'm just going to drag my text down here into the center, and when I hover over an appropriate place on this text, you can see I've got a little hand, but when I hover over other things, I don't have the hand. I hover over this circle. Oh, I gotta get there. There, I don't have the hand anymore. So I don't want to, if I want to move, I want to make sure I've got that little hand icon so I can click and then drag my text wherever I want it to be. So I'll put it in the center. I'll actually double click on it so we make it larger. So, oh, it's not doing this. Let me just zoom in. So let me click zoom in so we make it bigger. There we go. So now we can see the controls a little bit better. Now, what do these controls do? Well, the little icon that looks like a house right here, that is your sizing control that resizes this text proportionally. It's actually also the same as the numeric height control, because this numeric height control actually resizes the height, but it also resizes the width to match it proportionally so the characters stay looking like the characters. So if I were to change this numerically, like if I come in here and change it to a 1 and click apply, you'll notice that my text will get bigger. And if I want to resize it smaller, I can come and type something else in here. But usually when we resize text, it's easier to do it with this control right here. So if I hover over it until it's a little cross and then I click and drag inwards towards the text, you can see I'm making it smaller. And if I drag outwards, I make it bigger. So this is the way, a nice way visually to set my text size. So I've set it back to about where it was, and you'll notice it came back to 0.81, and we started out at 0.79. So if you change this, it changes this as well. The next thing I want to show you is this width control right here. So if you don't do anything, the width is always 100%. But if you change this numerically, you can actually spread, or actually pull this text sideways so that it spreads out. It won't change the spacing between the characters. It actually elongates the text a little bit. So if I put in here, say, 110%, meaning it'll be bigger than normal, I can click apply, and it'll actually make the text longer, but not any higher. So that's a very useful thing to fit text to a certain place you want it to go, or if you just want to spread it out for a different effect. You'll notice that it changed to 110. If I now change the height, like if I go down to, whoops, wrong key, if I go down to 0.6 on the text and click apply, you will notice that The spread out of this text stays the same because I'm still at 110%. I could change it back to 100 to be back to the way the normal was, but I can also, instead of typing a value in here, use this icon right here, which allows me to spread the text apart. So if I click and drag it, it elongates the text and makes it more compact. So I can keep doing this, and you'll notice if I just let off, it changes it visually, but it also changed it numerically. So if I want to, I can simply go back to 100% by typing that and clicking apply. And if I want to go back to exactly where I started, I'd come in here to my height and type in 0.79, which is where it started, and that was the default. Doesn't mean I have to keep it there, and you'll see when we make our quilt label that we will be modifying these things. But I wanted to show you how these two controls here interact with these two controls here. Now I also have a spacing control. Spacing control puts more space between the characters to spread the text out instead of just stretching it. So if I put a positive value in here, like a 1, and click apply, you will see that what happens is that the text spreads out, not by changing the way the character looks, but by increasing the space between the characters, and it does the same thing for all of them, so it affects the whole line of text here. And I can also put in a minus number, so I could put in, say, -1 and click apply if I wanted to make the text closer together, so there's less space between the characters. So by using combinations of all these controls, it's pretty easy to get text to fit in a place where we need it to fit, or to get it to look correct, balanced with some other object or other text in our design or our label. So I'm going to go back to the default spacing, which is 0, and I'm going to click apply to get back to our regular spacing. Now you'll notice here that I have gone back to 0 here with the spacing control, and with these two controls I had equivalents over here where I could visually adjust this. The spacing control has no equivalent shortcut or visual icon over here. You just have to control it with the numbers. The line spacing control won't matter right now because we only have one line of text. Similarly, the alignment control won't matter because we only have one line of text. But the slant control allows us to take this text and turn it into italics if we want. So I can put a slant in here of 0 to 60 degrees, and that slant is going to slant to the right. So if I put in, say, a 30-degree slant and click apply, you'll see that the text is going to slant over like italics to 30 degrees. I can also put in a negative number. I can change it to, say, -30 and click apply, and it will slant the text back the other direction. So now it slants to the left instead of the right. And I also have the equivalent to that right here with this lower diamond. This is the visual way to control the slant. So I can click and drag it to the left to slant my characters to the left, and drag it back to the right to slant my characters back to the right. So I can try and get it exactly straight up and down, but you see I'm actually at 1 degree, so that was pretty close, but I'm going to type in a 0 and click apply to get it to go back exactly straight. Right? So those are the text controls around the outside. Next to them we have these little black boxes. Okay, the little black boxes don't resize the way you think they would. That's what you use these guys for. But what they do is they control the envelope of the text. And you'll notice that instead of having a solid boundary line like normal objects do when we select them in normal mode, or if we selected this text in normal mode, it would have a solid line. This is a dashed line to tell us that this line does something different. And what this line does is it controls the envelope, or the box that the text is in. But it doesn't have to be a box. So for example, if I click and drag this black box, I can change where this point is. So I make the text go in an upward pennant mode like that, and I can do the same thing by clicking and dragging this one down like that. I could make, if I wanted the pennant mode to be even more dramatic, I could make these guys closer together. So I can leave it like that. So I can get these perspective or pennant effects with the text. Now, if you get into a situation like this where it's hard to go back to where you were, in text mode, you can right-click on the text and select Reset Frame. And when you do that, it's going to reset all of those controls back to their defaults, which is just a rectangle. The last two controls I want to show you are these two black dots right here. And these allow you to bend the envelope. And if I click and drag one of them and I pull it up, I will get an arc up or concave. If I pull it down, I'll get a convex envelope. And this is called actually a bridge. And so doing this gives me a concave bridge. I can do the same thing with the bottom. So I can click and drag that up to make a double concave bridge. All right, so that's a cool thing that you can also do, and you can also play with these at the same time. Again, if you get somewhere you don't like, you can right click on it and you can select Reset Frame. Now while we're here, there's one more thing I want to show you, and that is when we're dealing with frames, you can also right click on it and select Envelope, and here we have given you some presets. So you can get a pennant right, concave top, concave bottom, convex top, concave bottom, etc. So you could select one of these. So like if I do the double concave bridge, like I just showed you, you'll see that it goes to approximately that. And then if you want it to be a little bit more, you can still adjust it. Okay, so those are just some presets you can use to preset the text envelopes. So I'm showing you all this, but we're not actually going to be using any of them. So I'm going to go back and reset my frame back to normal. All right, and then the last thing I want to show you is these little diamonds and squares in the middle. So let's talk about the orange boxes for now. If I hover over an orange box, I get that double-headed arrow, and if I click it, now what's happened is you'll notice that my selection controls have gone away, and I've got a new set that are in green around just the M. So by clicking the box that's associated with the M, I've now taken control over just this M. So these green boxes at the corners, at the upper left and lower right, allow me to resize this character independent of the rest. So I can make that M bigger, and I can also, if I click and drag, move it up. And I can also move it anywhere I want. So I can move it over to space it out a little bit. So if I wanted to create text that had a bigger capital letter, for example, I could do it with that. I can also rotate this with these dots in the center. So if I hover over them, click and drag, I can rotate that M anywhere I want. So I can create any kind of a text effect I want by using the individual controls. Right? So that's what the little orange square does. I'm going to do a bunch of undos to get my M back to where it was. Let's see how many it takes. Okay, there we go. We're back to where it was, because I want to show you the last really cool thing, and that's these blue diamonds. What the blue diamonds do is they control the inner character spacing on a character by character basis. So for example, if I want to move this X over a little bit closer to the E, if I click and drag the blue diamond that's between the E and the X, I can move everything to the right of that diamond over. So I'll not only move this X, but I'll drag the T along with it. So let me just move that over. And just to show you how this works, I'm going to actually snug up the bottom down here. I did that just so you can see it. You wouldn't want to stitch it this way, but I'm doing this just so you can see that the adjustment I made here will stay when I do something else. So for example, if now I want to move this whole word text over closer to the Y, I can click and drag this blue diamond, and I move everything to the right of that blue diamond over. So now I've got closer spacing here, but you'll notice that it didn't affect my spacing that I had already set up over here. So this is a really cool way to adjust our inner character spacing on a character by character basis if you want just a little more, a little less space between the characters. And when we create our quilt label, you'll see how that comes into play. Now there's one other thing I want to tell you about the text mode here, is that oftentimes you want to be in text mode and you'll be looking for all of these controls and they won't be there. And if I click my normal select tool, you'll see that I still have the text selected, and I can do all the things I could do with it in normal text mode. I could rotate, I could squish it, I could resize it. I can do all those things with it like in any other object, but you'll notice all my extra text controls are missing. I can still control it numerically over here in this mode, but my visual controls are missing. Now they're not gone permanently, but when you see it like this and you want to get those controls back, assuming it's still a text object, meaning you haven't converted it to stitches or broken it apart or done something like that, and it still says text over here, means you can still manipulate it as text. So when you don't have those controls, it's because you are in normal select mode. To get back to text mode, all you got to do is come up here and click on the T, and you will be back in text select mode. Okay, so that's how you get back and forth. So if I want to go to normal mode, I can just click on my normal select tool, and now I'm out of text mode. All right, so those are the basics of selecting and manipulating text using the text controls. And I'm actually going to delete this, and I'm going to do it by pressing the delete key on my keyboard. I'm going to double click my zoom tool to bring my boundary box back into play. I'm still in text mode, and you'll notice that I've got the asterisk. So again, once again, I'm going to click up here to get my first line of text. And what's normally going to happen is you are going to get the letters my text, and it's normally going to come up in Anna. Now, you remember when I first started the program, it came up in something else. That's because it remembers the last font that I used until you close the program down and start it up again, in which case it's going to start up with Anna again usually. But when you're working with text, if I go off text mode and then come back and create a new line of text, it's going to remember the last font that you used, and that's on purpose because usually you're going to be using the same font over and over again. Now the last thing I want to show you before we move on to create our label is something called multi-line text. So this is just one line of text. If I click in my text box beyond my text so that my cursor you can see is flashing beyond the T, and then I press the enter key on my keyboard, so now my cursor is on the next line, I can type another line of text. So let me just put in your text, right? And we'll click apply, and you'll see that now I've got two lines of text here. It's going to take just a second to bring it in. There we go. I've got two lines of text. So now the other controls that we kind of skipped over in here, our alignment and our line spacing, come into play. So if I want to change the alignment of these two lines, meaning where they align with respect to each other, I've got some choices. I can have them center aligned, which is the default, meaning that the center of this line is aligned to the center of this line. I could also right align them, so if I click down, left align them and click apply, you'll see that it moves over so that they're aligned to the right. Okay, there it goes. So that's just like a normal paragraph text, and you can probably guess what right alignment does. If I click right and click apply, you'll see that it moves the text over and aligns it to the right edge. So you can select either alignment mode, any of the three, depending on how you want your text to look. And this is for multi-line text. I'm going to go back to center, which is the default, and if you only have one line of text, then it really doesn't matter what your alignment is because there's only one line, so there's nothing else to align it to. So now we're back in center alignment, and I want to show you lastly what line spacing does. Line spacing controls the space between this line and any other lines that you might have. So if I want to increase the space between these lines, in normal old typewriter, and some people still with word processors will just put in a blank line in between these. The problem with that is you're limited to whatever your character height is. With line spacing, I can actually adjust that line spacing to anything I want. So the default is 25%. Now what's it a percent of? It's a percent of the tallest capital letter. So if I put in 50%, so let me put in 50 and click apply, you will see that it changes the spacing between the characters to be wider. Okay, so now we've got it wider. So I can change this to anything I want. If I want them closer, I can make them closer. Again, this number doesn't mean anything if you only have one line of text. But this is the best way to align different lines of text. So I'm going to go ahead and put it back to the 25% default before I actually delete that your text line, because I want to show you one other thing that can happen. If you have something that, whoops, I went back too far. Let me put in my text. If you have something that looks like this, let me click apply, where you've got the text box, the boundary, the envelope box around it, and you've got this big blank space under here, what that means is you've got a blank line under here. So you don't really want that if you only have one line of text. And you can see if I look over here, if I click in the text box, you'll see that I've got my cursor blinking down here. The way to get rid of that is when you're here, click the backspace key on your keyboard so that your text is all on one line, your cursor is all on one line, and then go ahead and click apply, and it'll get rid of that extra spacing. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and create our quilt label. All right, so we're going to put in some actual text here. We're going to change the font. So what we're going to put in our first line is we're going to put made with love. So I'm going to put M-A-D. I'm going to use small W for the width, and then I'm going to put a capital L-O-V for love. Oops, not Louvre. Hold on, love. There we go. And I'm going to change the font, and I'm going to change something that's kind of a script font, and I'm going to change to anniversary, and I'm going to click apply. And now you can see I've got a script font here made with love. So I like the way that looks, but you can see that it's a little bit big. Even if I move it over, it just goes right to the edge of my box. I could go ahead and leave it like that, but I want to come in a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the height of this to 0.65. And I figured out what that was before I started recording this by doing it visually, and I wrote down what it was. So I'm going to kind of just center it by eye for now. We'll center these things more precisely in a minute. But I want to show you a really cool thing here. So you'll notice that the W and the I are not exactly connected, and they could be. All right. So, and you'll notice that the A and the D and the M rather are not connected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on the blue diamond in between where I want to move it, and I'm going to move everything over to connect the I and the W. So now it looks more like a real script font, and I'm going to move the A over a little bit so it connects down here. So I'm going to hover over that and click and drag it over so it overlaps a little bit. And now I've got kind of that spacing corrected, and I've got this one corrected. And you'll notice when I corrected this one, it didn't change this one, which is part of the beauty of these blue diamonds. Now, you'll notice that some of these characters are not exactly connected either. And I could come in here and correct all those really quickly. But for this example, we're just going to leave them alone for now because I want to get moving on here. So I'm going to kind of move this around a little bit now that I've made it a little bit different. And I'm going to do a new line of text. So I'm going to click off it. My text tool is still active. You'll notice that I've got the asterisk now. So I'm going to click down here because I'm going to put in a new line of text. And you'll see that it used the last font that I selected and put in my text, which looks kind of horrible in all uppercase in script. But I'm going to put in by and then your uncle. And you probably want to put your name in there, but I'm going to put in your uncle and click apply. And I'm going to change the font. I don't want it in the same font. I want it to look a little bit different. So I'm going to select a font. I'm going to select the one just above it actually called Andrew and click apply. And that's going to give me a completely different look. And that's actually a little bit big for my text. So I'm going to come in here and put in 0.55 and click apply. And I'm going to kind of center this. And that looks okay, except for I don't like the way that this came in. I think these letters are just a little bit too close for my taste. So I could come in here with the blue diamonds and spread them all out, but this is where I'm going to use the spacing control, and I'm going to put in a spacing of 1. Let's see what that looks like, and click apply. And yeah, that's still not quite far enough. Let's try 2 and see how that looks. Put in a 2, click apply, and I like that. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to come in here and again just kind of put this in here like this. And the last thing I'm going to put down under here is the date. And I'm going to once again click off it and click down here with my text tool one more time. And I'm going to put in December 2018. And I'm going to change the font on this one. And for this one, I'm going to go back and use Anna, which is a pretty good general purpose font. Click apply. And in the default height for Anna, I put in quite a bit of text. So it's probably going to be, yeah, it's way too big. And I don't even want it that big. So I'm going to change this to 0.50. And I'm going to do that by typing in 0.5 in here and click apply. And it's going to resize it for me. There we go. So that looks pretty good. All right. And I don't really want to do it in that color. I want to do it in red. So let me go to my normal select tool. Now that I'm done putting all my text in, I'm going to click on that text. Actually, I don't want the outside one. I could, but I'm just going to drag a box around all the text just to select the text objects. And I'm going to change them to this red. All right, so now I've got it in red, and I've got 3D on. If I had 3D off, it would look like this, but I'm going to turn 3D on, and I'm going to select all of them again, and you'll notice over here in my sequence view, since I changed the text of the red, it now became a separate line item from the outline box, so now it's easy to select just the text. And I'm going to kind of move it for now down into the center. And what I want to do now is actually want to center all of these to one another. So I'm going to do that with my alignment tool here. I'm going to click it, and I have my center to rulers, which would center everything to the rulers. Since my box is centered to the rulers, I could actually use that. But what I'm going to do instead is use this horizontal center align, which is really what I want. Okay, so I'm going to align them to the center. So now they're all perfectly aligned. And that spacing looks okay. I'm going to live with that spacing. If I wanted, I could move, say, the December down a little bit. So there we go. I've moved it down. I kind of like that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So there's my basic text of my quilt label. Now, this is nice, and if that's all you want, that's great, but let's make it just a little bit more exciting and fun. Let's put a border around it. So I've got some decorative borders built in here, and if I click my border tool, I've got a lot of ones that go all the way around, and have multiple pieces, and I could use those. But I kind of like this little half of a border here. So I'm going to click that one, and it's going to come in down here. I'm going to move it up into here. And do I like that size? You know, let's make it, let's just stretch it a little bit. I don't want it any taller, but I could deal with it a little bit wider. So let's just stretch it out. Okay, so that looks pretty good. I like that. Okay, now I want to do the same thing up here. So I'm just going to click my copy icon, then my paste icon. That's going to give me a duplicate of it. I'm going to move it up to the top here. And I could leave it like that, but actually what I want to do is I want to flip it so it's the mirror image of this one. So I will use my flip vertical button to flip it vertical. And then I want to align everything together. So let me just select everything. And I could have done this all at one time at the end rather than doing it in separate steps like I did, but I didn't think of it. So I'm going to use that same horizontal center aligned objects just to get everything all nice and centered. And that's my label. It fits within my border, so that's cool. I could select everything and make it a little bit bigger, but I think this is okay. So that's my label. All I need to do now is save it. So that's how to create a quilt label with either My Decorative Quilter or Total Quilter. So I want to thank you for watching and invite you to come back next month where we'll explore some other exciting things you can do with Total Quilter.